first of all, it is getting diagnosed younger, especially in men. One of the big tie-ins for fatty liver that increases risk is insulin resistance. Gut health and the gut microbiota specifically is very tied in with liver health, because once blood goes to the digestive system, it goes to the liver next. And if your microbiome is producing harmful compounds because it's out of balance, your liver has to deal with the consequences of that.
You shared a list of things that are obviously harmful, but to me, it's clear the way you were explaining it is that, and I think this is one of the biggest misconceptions, and we see this with a lot of the folks that we work with too, the folks that have chosen the path to reverse diabetes and go down that path, is that there's this misconception that it's binary, it's 0 or 1, and most of the experts that we talk to, like yourself, it's never binary. It's like, guys, just cut it out or cut it down. If you don't want to eliminate, or if you can't eliminate, we get it, right? It's understandable. So for example, if you grew up on a steak and potato diet, for me to come out to you and say all of a sudden you're going to be vegan, yeah, well, it's not going to work, right? So there's that fine balance to say, I will continue, or you can continue with a little bit of the older habits, if you want to tag them that. But at the same time, you can learn the newer habits and practice a little bit of moderation. I guess maybe that's the word that I was trying to get to after all that discourse.
Yeah. I mean, nutrition is a game of averages. Yeah, simply put, right? Where you end up health-wise. Let's exclude extreme cases, because yes, people are dealt challenging hands, right? Of course they are. But on the whole, nutrition is a game of averages, and your health trajectory is reflected by, the totality of what you got up to on the nutrition and also lifestyle front. And so for me, I have a statement that I make, which is like, the most important thing for you health-wise is what you're not doing. And that's true of your diet. So, if you're not eating fish, for example, you're not getting omega-3 fatty acids. Those are vastly, significantly important for liver health and the resolution of fatty liver, right? Which is one reason why I brought up the red meat versus fish example, right? You don't see fish being championed in the same way in popular social media. Although my perceptions can be skewed, maybe I'm on TikTok too much, but nonetheless. So yeah, and same with physical activity. If all you've done your whole life is resistance training, you're going to get better return on investment by starting to run. And funny enough, aerobic activity. And by the way, resistance training is very important for healthy aging, but aerobic activity based on the best available evidence is a bit more advantageous for reducing liver fat content, if that's the goal at hand. So that's kind of interesting finding as well.
So let's go back to the point that you made a little bit earlier, which is that let's focus on things that we should be doing. You hit on a couple of those, the fish and the resistance training. Expand on that a little bit. So, from a food perspective, especially, what are some of the foods that people should be thinking about either adding more, introducing more, or expanding on the consumption of those, if you will?
Yeah, for sure. There's many different lenses or ways I could present these food groups, but I'm going to go through however I decide in this moment. Let's start with fish, okay? Fish, and especially fatty fish like salmon, sardines, trout, herring, mackerel, okay? This is the only dietary source of what they call the longer chain omega-3 fatty acids, which are EPA and DHA. So there are omega-3s in flaxseed, in tofu, and walnuts, which is very good for you. It's called ALA, but it's a shorter chain fatty acid. And one of the reasons why the fatty acids in fish are different is because they're a little bit more bendy. They're longer, they're more bendy, and so they can fit into the membranes of cells better. And that is really important, because I'm going to try and tie this in with insulin resistance. Is because insulin resistance is a big driver of fatty liver. Omega-3s actually make our cells more sensitive to insulin. One of the reasons is because they're long, bendy chain. It makes the membrane more fluid, and so insulin receptors can kind of swim around the membrane and congregate, and they can amplify the signal more readily. But you don't get that benefit if you're not consuming fish or supplementing omega-3s, for example, right? And that's a bit of a remedial scientific explanation, but it's still it's true, like from the mechanism perspective. So long story short, fatty fish, number one. In the absence of fatty fish, I think like non-negotiable EPA DHA supplementation, which can also be achieved from vegan sources, from algae. So someone does not have to make any compromises on their principles if they don't consume any animal products. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, I would have to say is beans, lentils, chickpeas, kidney beans, black beans. The reason for this primarily is that they're underconsumed relative to their benefit. And what I mean by that is like beans are very economical, very accessible, very easy. Okay. They're going to reduce the influence of any meal on blood sugar levels. You add beans to white rice or potatoes. Let's say you have someone who's not willing to give those foods up, totally change the blood sugar response. They make you more satiated between meals. Obviously, fundamentally important. Above and beyond that, we have great evidence that beans actually positively influence our gut bacteria. They increase the levels of healthy bacteria, right? So if I'm making the statement that the gut microbiome is ultimately reflective of liver health, then any dietary items that can improve the gut microbiome then are going to be of interest. Beans are one for sure. Another group of foods that are known to do this are called polyphenols. Polyphenols are found in flaxseed, berries, dark chocolate, tea, coffee, artichoke, herbs and spices, right? So beans, polyphenols, which come from certain fruits, vegetables, herbs and spices, and certain items, right? Like tea and coffee, fish. Okay, those are big ones. Another one I would say is what's called monounsaturated fat, which is basically just nuts and avocado. Fancy when I say nuts and avocado and olives. Okay. Now I'm going to pause there. Fish, nuts, beans, these are very underconsumed. So I go back to what I said earlier, right? The most important thing for someone is what they're not doing. Statistically speaking, these three families of foods, for various reasons, they're not really playing a huge role in the average person's diet. And what part of the problem is because I think we've got comfortable with the idea these are foods to be had now and then. Like, oh, I can have, what are the regulations? I'll have fish once, twice a week. You're doing well. Maybe not. If you ask someone, for example, how many times did you have vegetables this week? If they say once, you're gonna say, okay, that's not quite right, probably. But if they say they've had beans or nuts once or twice, okay, good for you. You're trying to get some, so I think there's a shift that's required there to look at these foods as foods to be consumed much more regularly. And if I had to give the distilled version of my philosophy, and there's a lot more to it in terms of how I arrive at that, but that would be a very strong starting point.
And that is so true. I just as you were giving that sort of the correlation with other things that we consume as part of our diet, if somebody said, "Yeah, I had a salad last month," you're like, "What? Where's the rest of it? When are you gonna? You need to consume a lot more of it." So to your point, there's underappreciation and then underuse or consumption of these food items. And what's interesting is as you were talking and explaining the gut microbiome to the connection to the liver and these different cells and the insulin resistance, it is very evident. And again, the more we talk to the experts, the scientists that work with us as well, is how some of these things have such a far-reaching impact on all these conditions, right? So be it cardiovascular health or diabetes in general or fatty liver disease or longevity in the grand scheme of things, all these things are so connected. So even the human body is so complex, the solutions are getting simpler and simpler. It's like, do the right thing. Yeah, it's a machinery that can break down like that and can break down in 1,000 different ways. But for the most part, a lot of the solutions are very simple, starting with food. So if I were to ask you, and again, I know diet can get controversial. Some diets have gained popularity over time. Some do well, some don't do well. But what are your thoughts on, is there a type of diet that is more friendly towards, maybe helping reverse fatty liver disease?
Yeah, if we have to put a label on it, I would call it a curated high polyphenol Mediterranean diet. Okay, that would be if we really want to put a label on it. And what that means is, so curated, I put the curated in front of it just to make it clear that there's many different ways to do a high polyphenol Mediterranean diet. There's many different ways to do it. Okay. And that's very important. It's not just like and for some people that it could be unappealing. And part of the reasons why some of these diets become popular is just because they offer this like this beautiful simplicity, this unimaginable simplicity. But in the real world, we have to contend with the fact that different food groups have different benefits. We don't like them all, maybe for various reasons. They cannot play a role in our life. And so what are we going to do? How are we going to contend with that, right? That's, if you're facing nutrition head on in real life, like that is the conundrum that you face, right? So a high polyphenol Mediterranean diet, what that means. So the Mediterranean diet essentially is just telling people the following, that it's like, hey, you right now probably don't eat enough fish, beans, or nuts. That's a big part of it, right?
Yeah.
You probably also don't eat enough whole grains, fruits, or vegetables either. And you probably, as a result of these foods playing a smaller role, probably it's the case that, red meat and other products are playing overrepresented in your diet, right? And for me, like, I don't follow the Mediterranean diet to a T where it's like, okay, it's dairy once a week, or, Greek yogurt is not the same as lard. We can't group, saying actually lard's not even dairy. It's not the same as, cream and milk, right? And, and salami is not the same as, a low percent fat ground beef or whatever the case may be. So we have, that's the limitation, I think, of the Mediterranean diet, is the limiting aspects. I think if someone does really well in other areas, they can carry higher intake, right, of these other components. So anyway, so the Mediterranean diet is basically saying, eat more fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, and fish. That's what it's saying, right? It's nothing like overly earth-shattering. The high polyphenol part is to say, within most of these families, certain foods have these higher amounts of compounds. Now, I haven't actually defined what a polyphenol is. Polyphenols are simply a family of compounds that are tied together by their chemical structure. Like, so polyphenol just means multiple rings. So you look under a microscope or however you bring it to life, it has multiple ring structures in terms of how it's represented, biochemically. And scientists essentially believe that these compounds, we have good evidence to believe that people who have more of these compounds, their bodies work better. They have less inflammation, less insulin resistance, right? And also, so it's a great example, like blueberries contain polyphenols called anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are very popular, and they have a really robust anti-inflammatory effect, and they help our cells to take in sugar. So even though blueberries have sugar, and sometimes people are deterred by that, ultimately eating blueberries will help to lower blood sugar levels and insulin resistance, because there's much more to them than a little bit of sugar, right? Green bananas, like, people love to think that bananas are off the table if you have a fatty liver, but green bananas are very high in a special type of fiber called resistant starch that your gut bacteria love, right? So anyway, that's just more in defense of fruit. So I digress. So high polyphenol basically means that you appreciate that research has shown that a higher polyphenol Mediterranean diet is more effective. And there's actually a famous study of the Gut Journal where they gave people a high polyphenol Mediterranean diet and a normal Mediterranean diet. People lost much more liver fat in the high polyphenol Mediterranean diet, right? And a high polyphenol Mediterranean diet could basically be, throw flax seeds in a bunch of stuff, eat more artichoke and blueberries, have some dark chocolate now and then, have some capers, which are very high in polyphenols, use ample herbs and spices, drink some green tea or coffee. You do those things, you're going to have a high polyphenol diet, and you're going to get the benefits of it, pretty much.
That's awesome. So actually, you know what? I'm glad. So I got some blueberries here that I was eating on my desk, and I've got my coffee. Well, I mean, it's a cappuccino. It's not necessarily not black coffee, but it's got some in it. Well, so if I were to summarize this last few minutes as we had discussed, is that food is not necessarily the enemy. It's about how much, what, and how often. As you said, it's about what you don't do is what you need to sometimes focus on to go back to the basics, and the right choices obviously will help you heal or reverse the fatty liver disease that you might be going through. Is that a safe, I guess, recap, if you will, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, 100%. And I think how I like to frame it is the reality that somebody faces if they have a fatty liver and they want to start to resolve it. I mean, and even what someone like myself does, right? So I have this overarching principle, high polyphenol Mediterranean diet, the curated part. What I believe it's about helping someone understand what the best day of their life looks like in terms of eating. Like, if they had to put something down on paper that checked every box, cover all their
Mm,
nutrients, all these antioxidant, anti-inflammatory compounds, helping someone understand what that means for them. So that also is out of respect for economics,
mm.
their the time, the amount of time they have, their food preferences, all of those factors, right? Helping them understand what that looks like, and then from there, putting them in the best position possible to make as many days as possible look like that. That's how I view someone's trajectory, right? And what that means is that there's going to be other stuff in their life, other stuff. That's all
Mhm.
good. We have a vision. Here's what the best day in your life looks like. How can we put you in this position as often as possible?
Yeah.
If you're in that position as often as possible, the likelihood that you're going to have a good outcome is very high.
Yeah. Well, and I love the fact what you just said, because we have taken a very sincere approach ourselves as a company that we are going to create everything as a size of one approach rather than a one size fits all approach, right? So
Mhm.
for me to go to somebody, to your earlier point, hey, go eat keto. Well, I don't like to eat meat, right? Or I don't have access to a lot of the stuff that is required by keto for that matter. So what are the incremental changes you can make that do fit within the person's overall, well-being, if you will, what they can afford, what they can get access to, and things like that. Those are critical. So well said about bringing it all together.